Hello, welcome to Web of Stories. My name is Melinda. Oops, I just dropped something. And I am here with my weekly wrap-up. The first time I'm doing them on a Monday, so I've switched from, well, I'm filming on Sunday, but Monday. We're gonna try this new schedule. T-shirt check. So those of you who don't know me, I live in the Portland, Oregon metro area, and yesterday, I woke up to the news that 47 is sending federal troops into our city. I live in the suburbs, so I'm not there, but still, that's our metro area. People have asked, what's going on in Portland? And I will tell you, abso-freaking nothing. Nothing is going on in Portland. Portland's a city where people do like to protest for fun over weird things. And there's a baseline of like what's actually going on in Portland, and we're below that. Like, the only thing that's going on is there's usually between 5 and 20 people across the street from the ICE facility with signs. Now, there have been problems with agents from the ICE facility trying to incite confrontations with the protesters. That way. And also, the ICE facility has been violating noise ordinances, so the city wants to get ICE out of there, like take away their lease. That's literally the only thing that's going on. There's nothing here. And there's lots of jokes about, just go into threads, there's lots of jokes about this, how, they'll never defeat Portlanders because we'll stand in line in the pouring rain for brunch sort of thing. And it's funny, but also sometimes it's so ridiculous and awful. And for those of you who don't know, in 2020, there were incidences. There were protests. Again, Portlanders like to protest, and they are, for the very most part, they are very peaceful. There is a group of people who are anarchists, basically, and they really come from, I'm a little crooked, they come from north of the border, not Canada, but Vancouver, Washington. More from the Camas area, I think, is where they actually come from, who came down and caused some problems. There was like a block where there were some problems, and in 2020, when this all had happened, when he was 45, he sent federal troops in who went after everybody, and brave Portlanders, we defended our city with leaf blowers because, the NRA, that's all about, we're going to protect you from government overreach. They were nowhere to be found. Not that I think people should have guns for that. Anyway, I have lots of thoughts on this, and so I don't want this to be a whole political thing. Just know I'm reporting from the front lines, apparently. I don't know. But I'm here to wrap up my week, and I have quite a few books to talk about. Last week, someone commented, how did you read 3 books in a week? And I want to clarify that even though I have, hold on a sec here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 books, although I'm only going to talk about 7. It's not that I read 8 or 7 complete books in this week. Some of them I have been reading for a long time, including one I have been reading for months, which should not have taken that long. And also, a lot of these are shorties, so there you go. So let's go back. I am not going to talk about one, which is for the BookTube prize. So you will have to, that one's everyone who is gone is here. And you'll just have to tune in to when I do my BookTube prize wrap up to get my thoughts on that one. The next book I finished was a shorty, and it's one that I have set aside for a couple shorty Septembers in a row, and I finally got to it. And it is The Body by Stephen King. This is the novella on which the movie Stand By Me is based. I have seen Stand By Me, but it has been many years. So I remember Stand By Me, and I remember enough to know that that was a very faithful adaptation of this book. Really did a good job of kind of capturing sort of the sense of youth and the sort of adventure and the time gone by sort of thing, and there's definitely a sad element to this. But what it doesn't really capture, at least not that I remember, that's in the book, is that a lot of the experiences of the boys in this book, there's 4 boys, focuses on 4 boys, deals with them dealing with trauma. I hadn't picked that up from the movie, or at least I hadn't remembered it. And I think Stephen King does a really good job of portraying that. I am not a huge Stephen King reader, although I do read Stephen King. I probably have more respect for him as a writer than I would say I'm a fan of his, if that makes any sense. Part of that's because I'm a weenie And even though I do read horror, he is the only horror writer who has actually scared me. I didn't sleep for quite some time after reading Salem's Lot. Let's just say that. But I do think that he's very skilled, and I think this is a really excellent. If you've never read Stephen King, this is not at all scary. There are some really tough parts about it. Also, we're talking about like 8th grade, 9th grade boys going into the 8th or 9th grade. I can't remember which one. So they talk like them, and boys at that age tend to really like to grow their vocabulary with lots of 4-letter words. There's a lot in there. It's very true to life, but just let you know, there's a lot there. Yes, this is good. I highly recommend this. Great. The next one I finished. Now, this is one I started in August. I started as an audiobook with my family on a road trip, and we only got halfway through it. But my family was enjoying it so much, they didn't let me finish it until they could all listen together. So last weekend, which is why I started doing my weekly wrap-ups today and not last week, last weekend we did a little mini road trip to the beach because we had to make up a night. It's a thing. Whatever, it's a thing. We finally finished Sunrise on the Reaping, which is the second prequel to the Hunger Games series. I have read the Hunger Games trilogy. I have seen the first 3 of the movies. There's 4 movies out of that trilogy because, you know, they like to do that. I thought the third one was just really boring and never went back to the last one. My daughter has read the trilogy and seen all the movies, and I think my husband has seen all the movies. None of us have read Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. We just weren't interested in it, although I do have an audiobook version of it. My son, I don't think, has done any of that. I don't know, but we decided to listen to this. This, of course, is Hamish's story. This is really good. This hit me a lot harder emotionally than the original trilogy. And I don't know if that's just because this is more of an emotional story, or it's a prequel, so I already know what the fruition of everything was, or the fact that when I read the trilogy, I was the mother of small children, and I am now the mother of teenagers, the age of the kids who would be going to the Hunger Games. So it is very violent, of course. I mean, it's what you would expect from violence. There is one scene there I think it went a bit past what I would expect, which was like, ugh. And there were times when both my husband and I we were listening to this, he's driving. We both go like, ugh. Just, it's a little graphic in places, but really good prequel to explain a character who's a little enigmatic in the original trilogy. Yes, so I think that you come out of this with a much better understanding of Hamish and some other characters. This is a prequel. The question with prequels is like, can you read it or listen to it before the trilogy? And I would say, as long as you don't listen to the epilogue of this, listen or read to the epilogue of this, you're probably safe. If you want to do it before you read the trilogy, I would recommend not doing that, but you're probably fine. The epilogue will spoil the entire trilogy. So just FYI. Highly recommended it. Great audiobook. We all really enjoyed it. Okay, my next book is kind of my disappointment of these books. And to be fair, it's probably a little bit of a disappointment just by comparison. So it is a shorty. And there were 3 shorties that kind of started all around the same time. There was A Pale View of Hills by Kazuo Ishiguro. There was 3 Days in June by Ann Tyler, which I have right here. And then there was this one, which is The Lost Daughter by Elena Ferrante. And all of these books they kind of are sort of in the same kind of realm of like women reflecting back at a point in their lives and trying to reconcile that with their present sort of thing, and kind of looking back in terms of motherhood. It's kind of very broad, but they all sort of deal with that. And when you read 3 books, it's all kind of sort of deal with the same thing. You can't help but compare them. So of course, one of them is going to be on the bottom. And I really feel like this one, maybe if I hadn't read those other 2 books, would have stood a little bit better on its own. In this story, we follow a woman who is she's divorced, she has 2 daughters. Her daughters are young adult age, and they are often, she's Italian, This is translate from the Italian. Her daughters are off in Canada, and she's going to go on a little vacation, take herself to Naples for a little solo vacation. And while she's there, she kind of gets entwined with this Neapolitan family that's there, or maybe they're Sicilian, I don't even remember, another family that's there, and things happen. And I just didn't enjoy this as much. I really didn't like the main character, for one thing. And the main character does this thing that, I don't want to say she does this thing to a small child, but it's a thing that affects a small child that didn't make any sense to me, and I just found really cruel. And I just had no sympathy for this woman. And I think that, I don't know whether or not I was supposed to have sympathy. I kind of felt like I should have, but I didn't. So, it's well written. There apparently is a movie version of it. I don't watch anything, so I don't know these things. But it has Olivia Colman in it, I think. I don't know. But, yeah. Elena Ferrante is really good at, really getting down to the bone and really unflinching and looking at people. And when you do that, you don't always see things you like. And I understand that. I just kind of felt in this one, there wasn't really an anchor of something to kind of give me some emotional attachment to anybody there. Plus, I read it with two other books that kind of dealt the same thing that I felt much more successful and more enjoyable to read. So this one was not my favorite. Still well written. If you like Elena Ferrante, I would say give it a try. It just wasn't my favorite. And now we're going to go from one that wasn't my favorite to one that is my favorite. Oh my goodness. I did this as a buddy read. I also did this because I did one of my story graph challenges. There's a category that says, read a book that an AI chatbot recommended to you. So a few months ago, I went to an AI chatbot and I said, these are my 5 favorite books. What should I read next? And it popped out 3 titles. I can't remember all 3 of the titles, but 2 of them I had already read and liked. So good one. And the third one was this book, which I already owned and I hadn't read. And so I wanted to read it at some point, and it is a shorty, just barely. It's, I think, 245 pages. I read it ebook release. I'm going by what either Storygraph or Goodreads says, but we're going to call it a shorty. And I buddy read it with a commenter, Christina. We've done a lot of buddy reads. We buddy read well together. And this is Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. So kind of an interesting experience because I have already read Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, and Christina had not. So I went in with it when you start reading this book, the basic startup of the story, as best as I can explain it, and I don't want to go any further than this because it really would be a spoiler, is you meet a guy who lives in this huge house, like hundreds of rooms house, maybe by himself, maybe there's another person, and it's just kind of what is he doing there? That's the setup for it. And when we first started this book, I was thinking one thing, and my mind is trying to make this one thing, and then something, and I can't even tell you what it was, maybe a third of the way through, because I've read Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. I keep wanting to call it Dr. Strange, but Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. All of a sudden I went, oh. And totally changed my thinking about it. Not that I was not enjoying it before, I just was looking at it through a different lens. I will say, I did look this up. These are written, Piranesi and Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell exist in the same world. They're not at all related to each other. Piranesi set in the relatively present day. Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell is set in the first half of the 19th century. There's no real tie between the two other than they're in the same world. Now, so I went into this book with the knowledge of Strange and Norrell, and Christina went in without it, and yet we both really loved this book. I've heard great things about it, and it's worth every single accolade. This book just hit me, and it stuck with me, and if you've not read Piranesi, I do know that there are people who don't like Piranesi. It seems that this is a book people either love or hate, and I honestly can understand why people wouldn't like this book. You do have to really be able to be okay with not knowing what's going on for a while. You do find out what's going on. It's not like when I read A Pale View of Hills by Kazuo Ishiguro, where I said you just have to kind of realize that some things are never going to get resolved, any of that. This one you do find out what's going on. But for most of the book, you don't. And you have to be okay with that. So, loved it. 5-star book for me. Fantastic. The next book I finished, I am not going to talk too much about because on Wednesday, you will see a whole video about it. And that is As You Like It by William Shakespeare. This was my September read for the Bard Room. I really wanted to get my video out for this out in September because it's Shakestember, and I just didn't finish this in time. I think I finished this last Thursday. So October 1st, you'll get my Shakestember video on this one. I'm not going to say much else about it because I do have thoughts about it. I kind of feel like my thoughts are still unformed about it for several reasons, which are kind of in that video. So if you want to know what I thought of As You Like It, you'll have to tune in on Wednesday. Okay, the next book I had is one that I have been reading for a very long time. I read it on the Serial app. Someone suggested this book to me because they said if I read this book, I would understand the rise of 45/47. I'm like, okay. And this book is Elmer Gantry by Sinclair Lewis. After reading it, I will say it didn't really explain. I don't think it explained the rise of 45/47. I think it explained the rise of people like Joel Osteen and these people who use, I'm not going to go Christian nationalism, but who use religion, whatever the religion, it could be any religion, I guess. They use religion for self-promotion and creating power for themselves, which I don't really think is 45/47. I think there's a lot of other things going on there. But this Elmer Gantry is about, we meet Elmer Gantry, he's in college, and he's sort of a party boy, and he somehow gets in with this Baptist group, and he's still a party boy. He just sort of kind of gets with them and realizes he can get away with stuff. And through this, he becomes a pastor, and things happen, and he becomes richer. He becomes what we would call maybe now a televangelist through the book, and he's definitely, we'll just say he's a sinner. He is a sinner. I think this book suffered a little bit because I did do it on the serial reader. I early on got off schedule, so it took me a long time to finish it. I think if I had had the book in front of me to read and I read through it, it probably might have been a little bit more effective. It's not bad though. It's definitely some humor there. Sinclair Lewis apparently was, I think, invited to his own lynching because of this book. He did go to jail for a night because of this book. It definitely, yeah. I gave it 3 stars. I think that's a pretty fair rating of it. I would not recommend on the Serial app just because of that spreading it out factor. Plus, the issues I got on the Serial app would end in sort of incomplete places. Sometimes that happens with them, I think you're just better getting a book of this and reading it. I enjoyed it. Probably didn't rock my world. I don't think it did what I had hoped it would set out to do. But that's not an issue of the book. That's just my expectation and what I was told. But yeah, Elmer Gantry by Sinclair Lewis. I can now say I have read that. And my final book was another buddy read, and I finished this last night. I buddy read it with Michelle, and Michelle Lynn reads. However, she's still reading it, but I'm going to tell you anyway, because I think our thoughts are pretty similar on it. And this is Anna of Kleve, or Anna of Kleve, The Princess and the Portrait. This is book 4 of the 6 Tudor Queens series by Alison Weir. She is the second divorced of Divorced, Beheaded, Died, Divorced, Beheaded, Survived. And I kind of feel like going into this, I should tell you, as you know, I am a Tudor girly. I have a degree in British medieval, well, actually they're Renaissance. I know about the Tudors. I studied them in school. I know the Tudors. So I'm coming to this book with a lot of knowledge going into it. And these books, like the first one, the Catherine of Aragon one, was the first fiction I had read from Alison Weir. I had read her nonfiction, but that was my first novel of hers. And so Catherine of Aragon I really liked, but I felt that it was very, very close to the history, definitely right there, right with the history. But I liked it. And then you get to Anne Boleyn. And Anne Boleyn is admittedly a very hard person to do, although she's everywhere. But everyone knows about Anne Boleyn, but she's really an enigma. I think that there's been some folklore around her that has risen up that I don't think is earned by her. I have a lot of views on Anne Boleyn. I think she's incredibly interesting, but I also don't see her as a tragic figure, so there's all that. And I think Alison Weir did the best she could with that. I think it's just very difficult. And then we had Jane Seymour, who I think historically is just boring. But Alison Weir did a really good job with that book. She introduced a fictional element that I think really helped the book, really held everything together, gave a real point to that book. I was really impressed with Jane Seymour, although the Catherine of Aragon book is still my favorite. And so I was looking forward to the Anne of Cleves book because I like Anne of Cleves. She, of course, was the German princess who Henry VIII, after the death of Jane Seymour, like a couple years after the death of Jane Seymour, realized he had to get married again. And at this point, this was the second time he was going to have a diplomatic marriage. So his marriage was going to be, an alliance with another nation. That, of course, was what happened sort of with Catherine of Aragon's a special case because she was brought over to marry his brother, but that was the same thing. That was a diplomatic marriage. So, he sends out Hans Holbein, who was his artist, to paint pictures of these women that are in the running to be his wife. And some of them are like, yeah, I know what he did to his other wives. I'm not interested. But Hans Holbein came to the Duchy of Kleve, or Cleves, and painted portraits of Anne and her sister Amalia, who is Emily in this book, and Anne is Anna. And very famous portrait, maybe I'll stick it up here, of Anne of Cleves. Very famous. I think it's in the Louvre now. But anyway, I thought she was so wonderful. This is the story that was told. And then when she met him, he didn't like the way she looked, and they were married, but it was never consummated. And then they annulled the marriage for non-consummation, but she agreed to everything. So he gave her this really nice settlement. He decided that she is his sister and she was part of court, and they became very good friends after the annulment, and he was off doing his other things with wives. Interesting character. And I do recognize this, even though she's interesting, there's not a lot to her story. So, okay. Alison Weir did a good job with the Jane Seymour book, so let's do a good job with this one, and that's not what happened. There's something that she does that's fictional, and I'm going to stress this. It is fictional. It is not at all true. That she does in this book, I won't tell you because it's ridiculous. And it is a storyline that goes through the whole book, and it drove me crazy. And I was like, this is ridiculous. This is absolutely ridiculous. And then when I had wanted to, I was very tempted to jump ahead to the author's note and just read what her thoughts are, why she did this. But I didn't. I waited until I had finished the book. And, there were things about this book I did like. There was historical elements that were really strong. I did wish she had focused more on Anna's relationship with Princess Mary and Princess Elizabeth, later Queen Mary. Elizabeth becomes queen after she dies. Because that was a very big part of her post-queen life. And she didn't spend as much on that as I thought she should have. That was a little disappointing. But, I think that she got like the character of Anna down pretty well. Yeah, okay. This is an interesting book because it also goes past the last book in the series, because Anne of Cleves outlived all of the queens. She died partway through Mary's reign. At that point, all of the other queens had died, and Henry had died. So, spoiler for if you don't know what happens, spoiler for the next two books. But this made-up storyline is in there. So we get to the author's note, and I realized Alison Weir has done this once before, and it really drove me crazy. And she did it in one of her nonfiction books. In that, and I think I talked about it when I reviewed this book, she had this theory, rumor, I don't know what, that Edward II, the guy who, that one, I'm not going to talk about how he died, or at least what they did when he died, okay? Because that goes off the rails. But her whole theory was that he didn't actually die, that he actually snuck out in disguise and they killed someone else. And I'm reading this, I'm going, what are you even talking about? This is ridiculous. Do you understand how crazy you sound? There is no way this could have happened. So I get to this author's note, and I'm totally expecting her to say, well, this is just fictional. No, she goes into this, well, you know, it could be this, and just grasping at straws. And I'm like, lady, come on. You are sounding a little crazy right now trying to push this. So that irritated me. I did give this 3 stars because there were things in it that I liked, and I'm definitely reading on in the series, but I'm going to give myself a little break before I move on to Catherine Howard. I do have high hopes for the Catherine Howard book because Catherine Howard's short tragic life was very full. So Alison Weir doesn't have to make up a lot of stuff there. So it's really good just on its own. But yeah, I'm going to take a little break from this series. This was probably the least successful book for me from this. I think that she could have taken other directions to make this work, and I don't like the direction she took. But I'll still read on, and I'll still read her nonfiction too. So yeah, you know, whatever. And you know, no one's perfect. I have this thing with Alison Weir I don't like. That's okay, but I like most of everything else. So that was this one. So those are minus the 2 I didn't talk about, the 8 books that I finished during this slightly extended week. I will tell you, I have I think 3 books I'm definitely going to finish before the end of the month. So I'm trying to decide. I don't know if I'm going to include those in my monthly wrap up, which will probably be on Thursday. Tuesday will be my book haul, my September book haul. Or if I will just kind of really go into them the end next week's. We'll see. We'll see how much reading I get done kind of after the month and decide. But yeah, that was my extended week. My missive from the front line of the war. There you go. Nothing going on here. Absolutely nothing going on. There's people dressed like chickens who are holding signs up across the street from the ice facility. That's what's going on here. I half expect these troops to end up in Portland, Maine, because he doesn't know there's more than one Portland in the country. Anyway, enough of that. Let me know what you're reading. If you've read any of these books, let me know what you thought of them. And like, subscribe, join my Discord. Thank you for spending this time with me, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.